During House of the Dragon, each of the major Game of Thrones houses will have a different role to play, with some families being significantly more crucial to the conflict than others. While the other Game of Thrones families are dispersed around Westeros, the Targaryens take center stage in HBO's prequel series House of the Dragon. The House of the Dragon will have considerably fewer families contending for authority in King's Landing because the Targaryen civil war is the main source of turmoil rather than the Lannisters and Baratheons, who are still in charge of the Iron Throne. The Game of Thrones ancestors will, however, gradually start choosing sides and leaving their houses to join the fighting once the Dance of the Dragons conflict gets underway. While the Stark family was the main focus of Game of Thrones, Ned's forebears will take a backseat at the beginning of the House of the Dragons era. It's probable that House Stark won't play a large role in the plot until Season 2 of House of the Dragon, because Season 1 will likely be establishing the foundation for the Dance of the Dragons following the death of King Viserys I. Instead, the Targaryens, Hightowers, and Velaryons, the latter two of which weren't particularly influential in Game of Thrones, will be the most significant houses at the beginning of House of the Dragon. The prequel series won't be reintroducing any of the original characters because House of the Dragon storyline appears to start about 170 years before Game of Thrones Season 1. A few families had already established themselves as significant nobles before the events of House of the Dragon, but the main Game of Thrones houses will still be vying for dominance throughout this time frame. Here is a list of the whereabouts of each significant Game of Thrones family during the events of HBO's House of the Dragon. Since the Targaryen line has held the Iron Throne for more than a century at this point, they will stay at King's Landing throughout the duration of the House of the Dragon. When the narrative starts, King Viserys I will be seated on the throne at King's Landing, while Princess Rhaenyra, his daughter and heir, will rule from the Targaryen storied residence of Dragonstone. While Rhaenyra is in power, Viserys I's brother and Rhaenyra's uncle, Prince Daemon Targaryen, will also be at Dragonstone, where he plans to wed his niece without his brother's consent. The Red Keep will also be home to King Viserys I's wife, Alicent Hightower, and son, Aegon II, where the latter two characters will remain after the king's death. House Stark will be back at Winterfell when House of the Dragons fight for King Viserys I's succession starts, under the leadership of Lord Cregan Stark. House Stark had generally avoided court disputes or royal politics prior to the Dance of the Dragons. The Pact of Ice and Fire was formally established by Lord Stark of the House of the Dragon and Jaehaerys in 129 AC, when Queen Rhaenyra brought her eldest son to Winterfell in order to secure support for her claim. While Cregan stayed at Winterfell for most of the House of the Dragon's activities, Rhaenyra's passing in 131 AC prompted him to march to King's Landing. After holding court in the Red Keep for 6 days during the Hour of the Wolf, when Cregan Stark first arrived in King's Landing, Prince Aegon the Younger gave him the title of Hand of the King. When King Aegon III Targaryen was formally crowned, Cregan started his return to Game of Thrones Winterfell, although he soon resigned from his role as the Hand. As was to be predicted, House Lannister continued to play a significant part in the events of House of the Dragon. Jason Lannister, who had previously competed against his twin brother for the hand of Princess Rhaenyra Targaryen, served as the head of the Lannister family during this period. Jason's twin brother, Sir Tyland, who previously worked as the Master of Ships for King Viserys I Targaryen before his passing and later as the Master of Coins for Aegon II Targaryen during the Dance of the Dragons, will also play a significant part here for the Lannister characters in House of the Dragon, with Jason stationed in Casterly Rock and Tyland having a key location in King's Landing. They helped Aegon II fight Rhaenyra's claim. Tyland Lannister will convene the small council the evening King Viserys I passes away to examine the succession plan and proclaim Aegon II the legitimate ruler of Westeros. Borros Baratheon, who served as the Lord of Storm's End under King Viserys I and King Aegon II, was the head of House Baratheon in the House of the Dragon's civil war. Because Rhaenyra and Borros were related, it was assumed that he would support her royal ambitions. However, when the Greens came to see him in Storm's End, he unexpectedly decided to support them. Except for commanding a few marches during the Dance of the Dragons, Lord Baratheon would mostly stay at Storm's End, moving only to King's Landing after Rhaenyra's passing. Ellen Baratheon, Borros's daughter, will also play a role in House of the Dragon. Her part in Season 1 is uncertain, although she'll eventually come into play at Storm's End when various kingdoms try to make marriage pacts with her father. Unsurprisingly, during House of the Dragon, Lord Dalton Greyjoy, also known as the Red Kraken, will be in the Iron Islands. Before Viserys I Targaryen dies, Theon Greyjoy's ancestor ascends to power. The young lord later earned a reputation as one of Pike's greatest Ironborn heroes. Dalton finally decides to back Rhaenyra's claim and joins the Black Allegiance when the Green Council first appeals to Lord Greyjoy on Pike. If the prequel to House of the Dragon includes flashbacks to Rhaenyra's early years, it will show her mother, Irin, at King's Landing as Viserys' wife just before she passed away. Jane Irin, the Maiden of the Vale, will be seen leading her house from the Eyrie in the House of the Dragon during the reigns of King Viserys I and King Aegon II Targaryen. Rhaenyra's claim would get swift backing from House Irin, with Jane remaining in the Vale for the bulk of the conflict. Joffrey Irin, a member of House Irin and Jane's successor, will play a significant role in the Eyrie as the Knight of the Gate. 3 different leaders served as head of House Tully, the family of Catelyn Stark from Game of Thrones. At the start of House of the Dragon, which is situated in Riverrun, Lord Grover Tully will be in control. Because of his grandfather's late age, Elmo Tully decided to intervene because of the House of the Dragon. He chose to stay impartial in the conflict until Rhaenyra and Daemon Targaryen's bannermen eventually came to Riverrun. Elmo would subsequently depart from the Trident to take over as Lord of Riverrun in place of his late grandfather, shortly leading an army to King's Landing. From their home in Dorne, where Prince Corin Martell is the head of the Game of Thrones family, House Martell will join the House of the Dragon saga. Due to the Lord of Sunspear's decision to abstain from fighting in the Targaryen Civil War, House Martell stays in Dorne during Viserys I's rule and the Dance of the Dragons. While House Martell of Game of Thrones joined the War of the Five Kings relatively late, the family plays almost no role in the House of the Dragon's political struggles. During House of the Dragon, the Tyrell family, like House Martell, chooses to stay out of the fighting in order to deal with the widespread divide that already exists in the Reach. The Lord of Highgarden is just a baby when the Targaryen civil war in the House of the Dragon starts, with his mother acting as his regent. Despite expectations that Lionel Tyrell's mother would support the Hightowers and Aegon II, she eventually decided against taking part in the conflict. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to comment, subscribe and give us a like.